we'll do the best we can. I think we have very capable folks handling the technology. Just from a reminder standpoint, I want to make sure everybody remembers that the public can see this meeting live on YouTube. So just keep that in mind, and welcome to everybody who's watching in that way. We have some board functions. The first thing, I want to make sure you're not distracted by me bobbing up and down slightly. My desk happens to be a treadmill, and so I'm getting my steps in while we have this meeting, and hope that's not too distracting for you. But that way, I can see all my screens with all the different agendas and policies and everything at the same time. So. And then let's see what else. Oh, the way we're going to do this, we're going to try to keep everybody muted the whole time so we don't have background noises and echoes and barking dogs and delivery people and so on that are coming into the meeting. And then if there's a comment that you want to make, use the chat feature. Down at the bottom menu, you'll see a little close, open a little thought bubble or a speaking bubble. You can click on that, and then you can type in that you want to make a comment. And what we'll do is when you that's all you have to do is say, I'd like to make a comment, and then we'll unmute your microphone, let you make that comment, and so on. So just know that that's the way we're going to handle that. We're going to do voting a little bit differently today, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, and I'll explain how we're going to do that. I know that there's a few of you joining us by phone rather than online, and we'll do our best to talk through everything that's happening so that you know which policy we're referring to. You can look at your hard copies of that while you're by phone. And then if you want to make a comment, I know you can't join chat, but I will stop and pause and give anybody by phone who wants to make a comment that opportunity. So we'll, again, when that time comes, we'll allow that opportunity. A couple acknowledgements I would like to make. I know that we have a new vice chair of the Innovation Committee, and that's Marshall Graves. So I want to point that out to everybody and thank Marshall for his willingness to serve that committee in that way. He's been very engaged on that committee, and I just appreciate him stepping up and helping Chairman Vaughn with that committee. And then Teresa Smith is the new staff liaison for that committee as well. So Teresa, thank you for your help in that way. And I know we'll hear from the Innovation Committee a little later. The other thing I want to do is just thank everybody on who is a part of the staff, any of the partners of this group. I mean, this team, this collective team of leaders and participants and staff has just absolutely stepped up to the plate in the last couple of months. I mean, to shift job duties of nearly 200 state employees within their team so that we could focus on meeting the needs of the unemployment assistance that needed to take place, proactively identifying issues that were going to be a problem, quickly figuring out innovative ways to respond to the problems. I mean, we had a 4,000% increase above normal application fees for assistance, and the idea that everybody who is involved in our labor and workforce team was able to manage that is, I mean, there are just no words to express the gratitude, and the fact that, I mean, was it without glitches? Absolutely not. But absolutely everyone expected there to be glitches, but the way that we proactively identified those, anticipating what they were, reacting when necessary, but staying ahead of the curve. Tennessee was a leader across the country for getting those services offered out to our residents. And I've got a lot of HR colleagues from many other states, and it was so clear that Tennessee was far ahead of where those other states were in their support systems. And it was just so helpful to know that our residents were weeks ahead of receiving assistance. And employees and residents of other states, the colleagues that I spoke with in the other states, I mean, they were struggling even to get their applications submitted. And so we were just so far ahead of that, and people getting their assistance in a timely manner. Again, it doesn't mean we didn't have a few problems, but my goodness, the way that everybody on this team and all the partners responded was just tremendous. And so I know I'm rambling a little bit, but my gratitude is just spilling over. So thank you for everyone who was a part of that and made that happen. It's great to see numbers climbing. It's great to see people getting back to work. So just really happy to know that we have a good system in place to help residents when it's needed. So again, just thank you for that gratitude, and I'm sure others may feel the same or have more to say about that later on. With that said, let's keep moving. I think we need to do a quick roll call, and Isla Bradley, if you want to take roll call or look at the participant list, I'm not sure how you want to do that, but I'll let you determine next steps for that.
Good morning, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. It's good to see you virtually. And I think that at this point, we're going to go ahead and do an audible roll call. And I believe Justin is just going to temporarily unmute everyone so that when I call your name, if you would confirm your attendance and the local board that you serve. And also, if you are representing by proxy, please state your name for the record. I'm going to wait because I think Justin is getting ready to unmute everyone. Here's a lot of feedback. If you can hear me, that would be great. Martha. Brandy Faust. Senator here. Deputy Commissioner Sherelle Campbell Street for Commissioner Danielle Barnes.
Here, present.
Jason Bates.
Present.
Mary. Noel. Representative Clark Boyd. Once more, Sarah Noel. Representative Clark Boyd. Ronnie Brewer.
Present, Greater Memphis.
Mayor Kevin Brooks.
Mayor Brooks is here.
Michelle Falcone. Ben Ferguson.
Here, representing Southwest.
Bill Godwin.
Bill Godwin is here representing Southern Middle Tennessee.
Marshall Graves.
Marshall Graves is present representing Southeast Tennessee.
Ann Hatchley. Once again, Ann Hatcher.
You did? Oh, okay.
Christine Hopkins.
Here, and I'm representing Southern Middle.
All right. Tony Nick-Najad for Governor Bill Lee.
Over to procurement.
Tony Nick-Najad is here, present.
Okay. Yeah.
Warren Logan. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. No, he's no longer on the board. Commissioner Jeff McCord.
I'm here, Eiler.
Good morning. Vonda McDaniel. Once again, Vonda McDaniel. Mayor E.L. Morton. Once again, Mayor E.L. Morton. Greg Persinger.
Here.
Stuart Price.
Present. Northern Middle Board Liaison.
Ann Thompson for Commissioner Bob Wolf.
Good morning, I'm here.
Jean Luna for Commissioner Penny Schwinn.
Hi, I'm here.
And Kevin Vaughn. I think I see Kevin Vaughn, but he may be muted. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Tyler? Yeah, I think we go ahead and mute everybody again. I think you've done that, so thank you for that. Okay, so.
Tyler, this is E.L. Morton joining by phone.
Thank you, Mayor Morton. Good morning again to everyone.
Thank you, Eiler, not just for the roll call, but for all the preparation you put into this. And I know trying to organize a virtual meeting is a brand new experience for everyone at this board level. So thank you for putting it all together and getting us all to the point that we actually have a quorum. So thank you for that. We need to go ahead and have a approval of the minutes from the last meeting, and the way that we're going to do that, hopefully everyone's had a chance to review that. In order to make a motion, I'm just going to have the first person to hit the chat button and say, I make a motion to approve the minutes. I'll call out loud so everybody can see or hear who that person is. If you have a chat function and you want to make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting, I'll watch the chat window and wait for that response. All right, so looks like Brandy Lassiter is making a motion to approve the minutes as submitted. And I'll call Ben Ferguson and I'll say his is the second. Okay. And then, so we have a motion and we have a second. I'm going to allow for any discussion. If you want to have discussion about the minutes, please just chat that you would like to make a comment. And then if you'd like to make a comment about that, we'll unmute you and let you hear what the comment is. Take a pause there. Okay, seeing no requested comments, the way we'll do this vote, rather than do a roll call vote, I will ask if there is any opposition or abstention from approving the minutes as submitted. So I'll give a pause there for anybody to make any kind of comment of opposition or abstention. Okay, and I'll give that same opportunity to anybody joining by phone. Okay, and seeing and hearing none, we will say that the minutes from the last meeting are approved as presented. Okay, so let's keep moving, and would love to hear the summary and overview from Commissioner McCord. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman. Thanks for having me. I just want to make sure you can hear me okay.
Yeah,
Can you?
fine. Sounds good, yes.
Okay, very good. Um, I'll be very brief. It's fair to say it's been an interesting time since the last time we've met. And it's not a secret. I don't think that our primary focus has been on working through this unprecedented wave of unemployment that's come to us. I want to thank the board, first of all, for the support and the encouragement. Like, like those things typically are, those words have resonate a whole lot more than you may ever know, especially in challenging times. So thank you for that. And I also want to thank the folks in our department. In a word, they've been extraordinary in many, many ways. And it's been my honor. And I know when I look back on this, it will be and reflect to see the just the men and women of this department, how they've responded, how they sacrificed, how they've done everything they can to serve the people of Tennessee. So again, I want to thank the people within the department especially. Today's job report that came out was actually not too big of a surprise for us. Very good news, but it's something that we've been seeing on the ground happening. And even though UI, unemployment insurance, will continue to be a focus area for us for the foreseeable future, we also are shifting our focus back to where we really love to be, which is moving people to meaningful work. And so as we move forward with this meeting, you'll begin to see that happening. And hopefully we'll continue to get more momentum as the economy wakens up and continue to get back to moving folks to, again, meaningful employment. So that's my report, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Absolutely. Thanks for your time and leadership, particularly in the real time we've been working through. So thank you. Okay, we have some policy approvals, and I want to get to those right away, get those out of the way before we do the presentations later. So what we'll do is we'll start with the Oversight Committee, and we'll take a vote after each committee's presentation. So Anne, if you want to start us off with your committee and kind of give us an overview of what we're looking at here and any recommendations that your committee had. I'm not hearing Anne. Okay, is there anybody, can we ask the vice chair of that committee to?
So I'm here. This is Ronnie Brewer, and hi, how are you guys? I thought I saw Ann on the call earlier, so maybe she dropped off.
Okay.
But basically, we have a policy here that outlines the way that we like to govern our one-stop operators. And so in the past, the one-stop operators have been able to not only it's almost self-governing, basically. So they were also the career I'm losing the wording. Hold on just a second. I have it, my notes pulled up here, and I think I better refer to my notes as I'm going through this. So the one-stop operators were also able to be the CSPs as well. And so what that created for us in the way that it was currently written was that it was almost self-governing because they were responsible for upholding the federal regulations. And so in the updates and review of this, we've basically asked that there are separate RFPs that are submitted for both of those things. And then anyone who is currently in both of those roles would then have the opportunity to be grandfathered in until the end of their existing contract. And then at that point, there would be separate RFPs or RFIs.
Okay, that's a nice layman's summary of that. I appreciate the overview. Was there any other discussion in your committee or anything we should be aware of?
So the one thing that I just wanted to point out is because it does allow them the opportunity to exist as a one-stop operator in both of those roles until the end of their existing contracts, was just the suggestion of looking at the duration of those contracts, because we obviously didn't have those contracts to review at the time that we were in committee.
Very good. Ronnie, thank you for that summary. So before we take a vote on that, let's take some questions or comments. And if you have a comment, just please type into the chat that you would like to make a comment, and then we'll unmute your microphone and listen to that. So any comment about the one-stop operator procurement policy? Okay, looks like Ben Ferguson has a question.
Just a question about the timing of this. I think she mentioned that this would, if you currently had a provider that's serving both roles, that they'd be grandfathered in until the end of their current contract. Being that we're at the end of June, would that potentially put you in a position where the next contract would end in the end of this month potentially? Does that allow those regions time to get to the next contract, or are we potentially putting some areas in a position where they've got to put out an RFP immediately?
Ronnie, thoughts on that?
So that was really the basis of the statement that I had for discussion, because I didn't necessarily understand if all of those contracts were going to end at the same time, or if they're ending according to their local regions. And if so, there's concern regarding like how that would be handled.
Does that answer your question?
It does. I think my main concern is that we don't put local regions in a position where they've got to put out an RFP right now with COVID and everything else going on. I think it's not ideal for the timing.
And then you may see Kenyatta's comment to all this, that they can always extend the current contract if it becomes problematic. All right, any other, thank you, Ben. Any other comments or questions on that? Okay, anybody by phone that has a question or comment? So let's, I'm going to ask for a motion, and we'll do that the same way. Who would like to type in a comment in the chat to make a motion to approve the policy as presented? All right, Martha Axford makes a motion. And we will say that Ronnie Brewer seconds the motion. That's the order I saw them. So if we'll capture it that way. And then any further discussion? Okay, Hearing no discussion, I'm going to ask for the vote, and the vote being if there's anyone who has opposition or abstention from the vote as presented, please indicate so in the chat. Any abstention or opposition by phone? Okay, seeing and hearing none, we're going to say that that policy is approved as presented. Thank everybody on that. So let's go to the Operations Committee, and Stuart, you have a couple policies to talk us through. And in this case, let's go ahead and hear both policies. And I think we can do one vote for both policies if there's discussion or
Thank you, Chairman. We had two policies to consider, and we met briefly this morning before this larger board meeting to discuss those, and want to thank Carla Garrett for fielding questions on the youth service design policy, and Justin Atkinson on the one-stop system design policy. Both of these policies are, of course, how we deliver these two different services. In the case of the youth service design policy, it outlines expectations around serving our youth populations with regard to developing planning, career planning, education planning, delivering and equipping them to achieve education milestones, whether it's secondary education milestones, post-secondary milestones, or certifications, fundamentally equipping them to enter into the workforce and provide for follow-up over a 12-month period after they enter into the workforce. This design policy sets up the structure and expectations and measurement criteria to serve that youth population. In case of the one-stop system design policy, it is likewise a great document that outlines the one-stop system design, how it's the different expectations that we have across the state, delineating the way we've structured statewide expectations and areas to be served and how they are to be served, with detail around office staffing, services delivered, and expectations for everything with respect to when the office is staffed, how it's staffed, and by whom it's staffed, and also establishing supervisory authorities, whether it's state oversight or local workforce development board oversights. Those are clearly outlined in the document as well. And so the Operations Committee forwards both of these without exception. We didn't take any exception to anything in either of these policy documents.
very good. Thank you, Stuart. Any questions for Stuart or the committee about any of the discussion that took place in that meeting over those policies? If so, just type your comments in. Okay, and any comments or questions by phone? All right, hearing and seeing none, let's ask for a motion to approve those policies as presented. And Jason Bates, looks like Marshall makes the motion. Jason Bates, I'll say, is the second, according to the order of chat requests there. So thank you. Any discussion? All right, so seeing no discussion, let's we'll take the vote as we have been. So unless you indicate that you're opposing or abstaining by chat or by phone, we will say that the policies are approved as presented. So I'll give everyone a moment to oppose or abstain. Okay, and seeing and hearing none, we will say that those two policies are approved as presented. All right, next, Innovation Committee. Kevin, tell us what your policies are. Again, we'll do both policies at once. Kevin, I see you, but I'm not hearing you. Hang on just a minute. There we go. Try again. I can, but it's very, very soft. Stick your face right up to the microphone if you can.
Thank you. Well, thanks to Grace coming out and helping us out on our committee. Thanks to Teresa Smith, Ryan Allen, and Justin Brooks for helping me get concept to par. We get approved today. One being the eligible provider list. 98% of this policy is going to stay the same. It just needs to be renewed. The only changes were with the way the policy was laid out and the federal language that was added to that. Other than that, that policy stays the same. Our other policy was the electronic case files. Also needed to be updated. There were a few other changes in this policy. The first one being a memorandum labeled timeliness and accuracy of reporting added to this policy. Was also attached to provide a list of named conventions, eligibility documentation. And last was the section of personal identifiable information was added to ensure the proper handling this information for the DOL guidance, which was added in section 5. Other than that, there were no new dates to the policy.
Very good. Any questions for Kevin? Thank you for that summary, Kevin. I'm not seeing any questions come through the chat. Any questions by phone? If you're on video, wave your hands wildly if you have a comment. Maybe not. I don't see any of that either. So, all right. Well, I will accept a motion to approve those two policies as presented. Watching the chat box for the first couple of comments there. I hear Ben Ferguson makes the motion to accept the policies presented. I see a second. All right. I'm sorry, I don't know who the phone number is, but I do know Vonda McDaniel, so we will say that Vonda McDaniel is the second. And we will ask if there's any other discussion before we take the vote. All right, seeing and hearing none, we will say that everyone is in approval of the policies as presented by Kevin, unless we see opposition or abstention, either by chat or by phone. Is there any? All right, seeing and hearing none, we will say that those two policies are approved as presented. So thank you to all of the committees for working through those policies and the changes and presenting those and summarizing those for the whole board. I appreciate everyone's time that they took to review those and get familiar with them prior to this meeting. So thank you for that. All right, I think let's hear from Ivan Greenfield, and if you want to talk to us about the fiscal update, I think, and then I think there's a vote as part of your review as well. Is that right, Ivan? All right. I'm not hearing Ivan yet.
It probably works best if you take the phone off.
Very good.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. And I just want to thank you all for your time this morning, and thanks to Patrice for assisting me in this with this presentation as far as moving the slides forward. Basically, our fiscal review is going to be in about 3 parts. Patrice, can you next slide, please? Thank you. 3 parts this morning. We're going to do a little fiscal review, looking at the numbers through third quarter of March 31st, and also presenting this a new budget format. Hopefully, it's more simpler. But we'll give you information that's needed to identify our fiscal position through the third quarter. And then the next thing, we'll look at the proposed program year 20 state reserve funding budget. And then lastly, we'll look at hold harmless requests around some state performance metrics, which is kind of tied to the whole corona pandemic. So, and those last 2 items, the budget and the whole harmless, will require a vote from this board. Next slide, please. So some of the issues that, or challenges, if you will, that we're seeing have to deal with decreasing appropriations. You kind of hear me saying this in most of the fiscal review presentations that we have been presenting over the last couple of years, really. In the last 3 years, we've seen a 10% decrease in our largest programs. We continue to see low expenditures, and talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. And we found that the remedies to these have been really how we leverage and align our resources with our partners, right? And also how we better embrace technology. And an example of that is really the virtual AJC has been just a best practice, and it's allowed us to increase services and access to services for our customers. So another challenge, and we kind of talked a little bit about this early on in the meeting, has been working remotely. COVID kind of presented a challenge, technology issues with capacity in our networking, not enough bandwidth. We didn't have enough laptops. It was a mad dash for laptops to purchase so that people could work from home, and now it's like that AWS is now the new norm. And so while there were some challenges, I think that we're kind of, I don't know if you're turning the corner, maybe that's overly optimistic, but I think we're moving in the right direction. So next slide, please. So here's a new budgetary format, and really just tried to keep it kind of simple as I used it before. It's just a P&L format where the 3 sections here where you're looking at where the funds come from, budget sources, and you're looking at cost against that, and then you're looking at the net position. And you look at the funding. Our major programs we have those access to those funds for a 3-year period, and that's the period that you're looking at currently. Program years 2018 through 2020, fiscal years 2018 through 2020. And it's kind of in 2 sections, formula grants, and those represent state allotments that are predetermined by some population metric, right? And then discretionary is where we actually go out and bid for that as a state, and that's like first come, first serve kind of thing. And then we look at the cost there also in 2 major sections, program administration, representing costs at the state level, or internal costs, if you will, and then contracted services, our grants and subsidies that are contracted out to local areas and other vendors. And then that net position, that third part just being the authorized funding less the operational cost through, in this case, year to date, 3/31. Also, at the end of this slide deck or presentation, there are some additional reference slides. Attachment 1 just kind of lists out all of the authorized funding by program. Again, just as a reference, if anyone cares to look at that or have additional information. Next slide, please. Sorry, there we go. Thank you. So we kind of talked about this already, but the most notable thing, again, is just a decrease in budgetary funding. It'll be interesting to see where we land next year. You know that last year we lost 4.6 million. This year we lost another 3.5 or so. And given COVID and the unemployment, most of those factors, the allocation is based on like unemployment related factors or low income related factors. So it'll be interesting to see where we land again come next year, given COVID and unemployment issues that we've seen. Next slide, please. So looking at overall cost, current year, 2020, see that a third, you heard me say this before, a third of those costs or 20.2 million are to administer the programs, and then the other 2/3, that 40.7 million, goes out to the local areas to provide services in their communities. And so year over year, we see that those rates have kind of been the same, third and 2/3. See that costs were relatively flat when you compare overall cost for internal. You see 31.8 versus 33.2%. So those costs have kind of remained flat over those the period to period review, and same as with the grants and subsidies costs, looking at 68.2 versus 66.8%. And again, at the end of the slide deck is another slide, attachment 2, that lists out line item costs. You know, so you can look at salaries over the active 3 years, and we also had projected costs for 21, 22. So that's just additional information to take a look at your leisure. And then next slide, please. So we kind of talked about this already. Observations, we discussed those. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So this slide just looks at the 40 million that we talked about in contracted services by program. And we see by and large 33.8 million goes out to Title I or We Over programs. Next slide, please. And you see that of that 33.8 million in expending the Title I, about a third of that actually goes to direct participant costs that are types of services listed there and the values associated with that, to the tune of 11.4 million. See that through the third quarter, if we look at this aggregately, that we're not meeting the state metric of 40% minimum participant costs. We're below that, 33% compared to the 40%. We'll talk a little bit more on that in just a second. Next slide, please. So that was the fiscal review part of it. I know I went through that kind of quickly, just being 10 minutes. So just wanted to present that new format and see if there were any questions. And please, you can contact me directly if you like, or ask me questions here today about that process. We certainly want your feedback to see if there's anything additional that you'd like to see in these numbers. We'll certainly look at how we can improve upon that. If there are no questions, I'll go ahead with the State Reserve Fund's budget for program year 20. We'll proceed. All right. So looking at...
I want to call out Marshall's comment. I appreciate that format. It is That's fine. We're just looking at Marshall's comment on the chat and agree that that format's very helpful, clean, easier to read. So thanks for working on that change.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Great. So continuing with the budget, again, this will require a vote from the board. But before we delve into the numbers, I wanted to advise the board of some upcoming changes. Last board meeting, we mentioned that the budget usually follows a TEGL from the Employment and Training Administration, at the USDOL, and that TEGL comes out really after the program year starts, and so we're looking at the budget process subsequent to the start of the program year. So we're going to, going forward, look at presenting the budget based on what's called a 90% whole harmless rate. And basically, under WIOLA, states receive 90%, a minimum allotment of 90% of the prior year's allotment average. And so what we'd like to do is in February, present this 90% budget, if you will, and then in October, true it up to adjust for any year ends. And what that will do is give us good numbers, especially around this carryover, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. But by allowing for the year-end process to go through, we can actually firm the numbers and have good final numbers for that October budget. And so,
Ivan, for my own benefit, I'm going to say back to you what I think I'm understanding. We're going to make our plan based on the weather forecast, knowing that we're pretty sure we know what that's going to be, as opposed to waiting until the day of and sticking our head out the window to see if it's raining. Does that sound about right?
yes, sir. And thank you for that analogy. I think that's a great analogy. Yes. Proceeding, we're just looking at the budget, starting on the left side where the funds come from. So basically, in PY20, we're looking at just under $10 million in our state reserve dollars, right? That's in a couple of pieces there. You're looking at administration, 2.2, and program, the 4.5, and rapid response, and so on. And then we have carryover of about $11.8 million. And so, if you recall earlier in the slide, I showed you that 3-year funding statement. And so really in the PY 18 and 19, we received roughly $11 million and $10 million in those years. So we've expended about half or utilized half of those funds. And so they're being carried over into PY 20. And so backing out the administration piece, that leaves $19.4 million that we're looking at budgeting for. And so on the right side, the proposed activities are the governor's priorities. You may recall last year we had about $6.6 million allocated towards that, which went to some really great initiatives. The rural initiative, we put out about $3.3 million with that. We had some consolidated business grants that we put out of about $1.4 to $1.5 million. And so this again is discretionary funds, discretionary activities that could be utilized by this board to pursue initiatives. Some of the things that we talked about around that focus that we had in 2020, like integrated intake systems or shared visions. Some of those things could be, these funds could be utilized towards that. That second component, economic development, the $5 million, really is how we engage business. We support them with OJT dollars, on-the-job training dollars, or other work-based learning type training services. And also to fund local areas who may have capacity issues, right? And so we would have additional funds there to be able to provide them additional dollars. And then the program and monitoring, which are required activities, you see that. I'm sorry, I skipped one. The program evaluation, which has been really, really helpful in this regard to help strengthen the system, to help provide some standardization in the system. And we've utilized EY in a big way in helping us to get our boards and our policies and other things in shape. We've used them to help stand up this virtual virtual environment that we're running in now, and so it's been a really good the benefit from it has been really good for us as a system. So that next section, 1.35 million for program monitoring and oversight. So you see the single audit there and PAR monitoring costs, and then systems administration FOS 2.7 million. It's recurring annual, and then grants management system. We had that there budgeted last year. That was a statewide effort, and that delayed, and so we're rolling that into this upcoming year. And so that's the proposed spend, if you will, for the program year 2020 State Reserve budget. We have to answer any questions.
I'll start with a question, and Ivan, thanks for the summary. Commissioner McCord, this question might be for you, but do you think that any of the governor's priorities will change based on what's happened over the past couple of months? And obviously the expenses for the state have shifted, and the income revenue for the state has likely shifted. So do you think that will impact his priorities at all, or do you think as it pertains to this department, that any of those things will change?
I think they're going to stay consistent for this department. His focus, and this coming in, was workforce development, was a primary focus. And I don't see that necessarily diminishing. Actually, I see it increasing as we rebound and recover and move people to work. So no, I have no indication whatsoever that the priorities will change as it relates to labor and workforce development. It would probably even get more emphasized than it was in the past.
Thank you. I agree with that. I appreciate it. And then kind of goes back to Ivan's question about, we're going to have to see what, we'll watch the funding decrease over the past couple of years. Well, it kind of makes sense. The unemployment numbers are way down. You don't need as much to help people get back to work, but maybe creating new opportunities for the labor force. But in this situation, I would think that we would need to see an increase or a reemphasis on job development and maybe a little more stability for our workforce. So hopefully we would see those funds increase based on what's just happened, as opposed to any additional cuts. Is that a safe assumption, Ivan?
Yes, I agree. I think too, we've had some increase in support that went out to the local areas around, disaster relief efforts. And so there may be some additional funds that go in that direction, but again, it's at the discretion of this board and the governor's priorities. So,
yeah. I appreciate you calling that out too, because normally, without a pandemic situation, all of our focus likely would have been on helping those communities that were impacted by tornadoes, and I just can't imagine how those communities have fared. With, I hate to say it, but attention taken off of them based on additional issues happening in the state and across the country. So, just been trying to keep those folks in mind and making sure those communities have opportunities to get back to work as well. All right, I've been rambling. Any other comments? Who has a comment or a question for Ivan? Let's go to the chat and see who might want to have a question or a comment. Okay, seeing none. Ivan, do you have, tell us about the vote we need to take.
It's just that you vote on the budget as is, as far as those buckets and the allocations to those buckets.
Very good. So do I hear a motion to approve that as presented? All right. Ms. Falcone, I think that's your motion, and then we'll take the second from Marshall. Any other discussion? All right, seeing no discussion, any comments from the phone gallery? All right, we're gonna say that this motion will pass pending any opposition or abstention from voting. So I'll give a minute for any opposition or abstention. Okay, seeing and hearing none, we will say that that has passed as presented. So Ivan, thank you for that good update and summary.
Thank you, Chairman. And then the last item for the fiscal update and review talked about this whole harmless effort, right? So we have these, we talked about expenditures being low. We talked about the minimum participant cost rate on the aggregate level being about 33% as opposed to 40%. And we think that that will continue to trend down here in the fourth quarter of this current year and likely kind of carry over into at least the first quarter of next year, if not the second quarter as well. And really it's kind of due to lack of business operations related to this COVID pandemic. And as local areas and other businesses try, continue to this business resumption plan or business resumption effort, as we continue to try to reboot the economy, we're asking that the board approve a whole harmless measure on these two metrics, the 40% minimum participant cost rate and the 80% obligation rate on first year funds for, again, this current year, PY19, which would be through June 30th, and then this upcoming year, PY20, starting July 1st through June 30th of 2021. The 80% obligation rate is one where if the local area has not obligated 80% of their funds in that first year, they stand to have that difference recaptured and reallocated to those areas that that would have made the 80%. We feel that this is appropriate given the times, and it would provide a measure of administrative relief for the local areas to allow them to continue this resumption of business.
So again, for my own clarity, just to say it back to you differently, look, we normally ask these folks to commit to 80% of the funds that they have to spend. Because of the pandemic and the situation across the state, there's a good chance they may not be able to get to all that. We're not going to hold them accountable if they don't get it all. If they do, great. If not, we're not going to take it back from them within this one time only. Does that sound right?
Yes, sir. Again, excellent analogy. Yes, sir.
And then any discussion or questions about what we're trying to accomplish with this request? All right, so Marshall's asking, Ivan, what happens at the end of the time? We go back, I'm assuming we go back to the normal accountability and restrictions, is that right?
That's exactly right. Yes, sir.
Marshall, you good with that? All right, so the question is, if they are below, are we giving them a time frame to get back to 80, or is it just in the next term or quarter or year, or what's the, at what point do we say, look, you got to get back to where you need to be?
So starting in 2021, program year 2021, which would be 7/1/2021, we would resume the 80%. I believe that so The local area's largest expense, by and large, is the career service provider contract, which makes up in some cases 50 to 70% of their costs. And so as those businesses start to resume, we should see the obligation rates pick up. It's the participant cost rate that may take a little longer, but again, by 2021, we should be back to normal, provided this pandemic does not extend, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, right? So we'll have to come back to that. But as business resumes, those obligation rate and expenditure rates should increase.
All right, and then the next question is, should we ask them to provide notice if they're not able to get back to the 80%, by that date? In other words, we don't want to be caught surprised at the end of the date. Should we have some sort of, 30, 60-day notice that, look, we ain't going to get there?
Yes, sir. We can certainly put that in the guidance subsequent to the board's decision today, that they will need to provide, even if they're looking at not making, part of the policy is if they're not making this, they have to provide us explanation as to why they're not making these, meeting these metrics. But we can certainly, as part of the decision today, provide guidance that stipulates that they must let us know why they're not meeting those rates and how they intend to get back to meeting those rates.
Got it. And ideally, it should have something to do with the fact that, they were impacted by the pandemic, right? I mean,
yes, sir. That's exactly right.
Reason, yeah. Okay. All right, other questions, comments? All right, so the motion that I think we're asking for is to hold harmless for not being able to spend the required 80% in this one-time only exception, knowing that they still have to show why, they still have to provide explanation, they have to do that in a timely fashion. So I'm seeing a motion from Ben Ferguson and Martha Axford. There's a second to that.
Sorry, there's actually two metrics. So there's the 40% and the 80%, sir.
Thank you. I'm going to assume, Ben, that you would stand that motion approved even with the correction that Ivy made. All right, so we will assume that that's the case. Yeah, so Ben says yes. So second from Martha. Let's one more opportunity for any discussion or clarification. All right, and seeing none, again, we'll take the vote in a way that allows approval unless we hear opposition or abstention by chat or by phone. So I'll give a minute for that. And seeing and hearing none, we'll say that that request for hold harmless passes as presented. All right, we're running just a little bit behind, but is everybody okay? I'm going to try to press forward here and try not to take a break and get through presentations. I know we're very interested to hear from each of the partners, updates on what's going on in their respective teams. So let's start with Kenyatta.
Sure.
Will give us a overview. Thank you.
And good morning, Chairman Berry, and good afternoon, and good morning or good afternoon to the entire board. Thank you for allowing me some time to present to the board. Before I get started with the presentation, just wanted to mention, thank you, Chairman Berry, for the compliments you gave to the staff who have gone above and beyond the call of duty to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep a strong workforce system in Tennessee. The American Job Centers, led by the local workforce development boards, are moving forward with gradually with their practices of getting into in-person services. All services have been going on virtually, and I'll mention that later, but I just wanted to say that we'll share with you an update on each local workforce development area and their plans on bringing things back into what we know to be normal with those constraints provided by the governor, the federal government, and the CDC. Also want to mention that the state workforce plan has been approved with one condition that's centered on board makeup, but wanted to give everyone that update. Thanks to Nikisha and Isla and all of those who've done the hard work, all of the partners that are part of the workforce system that built that plan. It has been approved with condition to the board makeup, and just wanted to give you that update as well. And finally, I wanted to say we've had so much to take place, and Commissioner McCord mentioned that earlier about everything that's happened since the last board meeting, and I couldn't be more proud of the workforce services team during 2 tornado disasters, and with COVID-19, we've been able to make sure that we're providing the right resources and services to Tennesseans to make sure we can get them to safety as soon as possible. Next slide. First of all, a question about what have we been doing in response to the pandemic. The first thing I wanted to mention is we made immediate transitions to virtual services and getting everyone working remotely. We were not necessarily prepared for that when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and we had the stay-at-home measures, but it didn't take long for the work of agency partners with this team leadership in the agency to get this remote operation stood up, and essentially right now we are operational, communications, service provision, everything remotely just fine. Also, what we did in response to the COVID-19 pandemic was made modifications to some of our services and programs. For our reemployment service, we suspended the work search requirements, knowing that hiring was going to be very limited during March and April, and we're working to return back to reemployment services now that things are getting better. If you saw today, the unemployment rate dropped surprisingly for individuals, so we want to make sure that the more people we can get into work through reemployment services, the better it is for the entire state and for Tennessee. Also, in our senior program, we made modifications to the paid leave just in case there were challenges for those participants who could not engage in work activities because of the stay-at-home rules. And also, we made adjustments to our warrant notices, given that there were a lot of warrant notices issued out during this time, and still they continue, where companies are furloughing or laying off employees. We've been able to provide assistance, but give a little modification to make sure that we're accommodating some of their needs as well. As you know, and as Chairman Berry, as you mentioned, the Wagner-Pizer staff shifted their duties to helping with unemployment insurance claims. That's not only on the dislocated worker side, but also for the employer side. We assembled a team to provide some additional supports there. It's also good to mention that the Title I staff, and I want to thank all the executive directors and local workforce development boards, they also have been providing some support to make sure that at least the basic information of helping point people in the right direction, they've been able to help provide that service to hundreds of thousands of Tennesseans that are in need right now. And lastly, the SNAP ENT program is working totally virtually, and I'll highlight some performance numbers, but I think you'll be surprised in what we've seen essentially from what we've done in response to COVID-19 is that there are several opportunities for us to provide a more expanded service to Tennesseans that combines both virtual services and in-person services. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. No, before I move on and go back to the other slide, last thing I wanted to mention, I hate I missed that, but the last bullet point of the Tennessee Talent Exchange, I hope everyone on the board has seen an update on this program. It was launched in late March. It is our first offensive of many in response to the COVID-19 economic downturn. And part of this is led by the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner Thomas, along with Commissioner Ezel and a few of our industry association partners. As you all know, the hospitality industry and other sectors were hard hit by COVID-19, where they had to let go or furlough thousands of workers. In turn, there were certain industries, named being grocery retail, supply chain and logistics, even IT and healthcare that had an increased demand during this COVID-19 pandemic, where they were looking for workers to fill their capacity needs. So we established the Tennessee Talent Exchange, which is powered by Jobs for TN in late March. Nearly 3,000 individuals have signed up for this program, and it is an exchange from those industries that have been impacted by COVID-19 negatively and transitioning those workers as soon as possible to places where they have similar wages, similar work hours in in-demand industries. A good example of this, Chairman Berry, and to the board, we've had anecdotal stories of individuals losing their job one day and the same day landing a job through the Tennessee Talent Exchange, so that they don't have that loss of income for the household. So I wanted to mention that as one of the innovative practices that we brought forward during the pandemic, which I think we're really proud of, and we look forward to the opportunities that it will provide us down the road. Next slide. And programs and services that we're offering now, again, all of the programs are operating virtually. Again, the American Job Centers are slowly getting into in-person services. They're doing appointment only, a few of them now. The phases will be appointment only first to see how things go, and then they'll go into more expanded services in person. But no services were basically ended, but more or less modified. We have been looking at service improvement and service enhancement, especially now that we realize that there's an opportunity to serve Tennesseans virtually. Ernst & Young has helped to pivot some of their work to help us with the virtual American Job Center and how we can improve services there, along with some other customer experience strategies that are going to help both the in-person experience, but also the virtual experience. Apprenticeships remain strong even during the COVID-19 pandemic. We applied for the Federal Youth Apprenticeship Grant, and we also applied for another expansion grant. 27 new programs have come into play in 2020, and we have registered 5 new apprenticeships since March, or since the COVID-19 pandemic has hit Tennessee. In SNAP ENT, although we are in virtual services, we have double-digit referral increases, which is a great big deal for us, and I want to compliment the team on that. And this has provided some evidence of program improvement by which we can make sure that more access and better services are provided through SNAP ENT. And all during this time, I also want to compliment our regional directors and the executive directors and all those involved in the processes. They have begun collaborating and talking virtually to build the regional and local plans, which we will share with the board on the August 28th board meeting. Next slide. The challenges that we face are, right now, it's to balance the capacity of there's still a considerable amount of individuals filing unemployment insurance claims. There's a lot of work that's still needed in that area as we begin to transition our Title III staff back to more of their normal duties. We just want to make sure that we understand the balance between unemployment insurance and workforce services. They work hand in hand, and so ensuring that the capacity is in the right place at the right time to lessen any complications on either end. We just want to be very sensitive to that. The expenditure rates are uncertain, and you made the vote and heard Ivan on the presentation of that, and that is also a challenge for us. We're also unclear on the adequate staffing requirements moving forward into COVID-19. Not sure of how things will play out. We are very mindful and want to be fully aware of how we need to shift and pivot resources and services to be in the right place based on whatever that need is, based on the services that we have within workforce services. And then the last one is just acquiring the necessary resources for innovation. Again, we're working to improve the customer experience. The Tennessee Talent Exchange continues to provide some opportunity. However, we have seen through early and preliminary data the $600 a week provision through unemployment insurance resources from the federal government has, in fact, slowed down the growth of that program. What we have done is entered into a partnership with Coursera to not only just provide a throughput for dislocated workers to employment, but also to provide free training resources and credentialing resources to individuals who are unemployed in Tennessee. So essentially about 4,000, almost 4,000 college courses have been made available to unemployed Tennesseans that they can take these courses free of charge at their own pace, at their own time, as long as they complete before December 31st and they enroll before September 1. And then last, a challenge is trying to get the Virtual American Job Center revamped, redesigned, and ready to deploy to help with some of the capacity needs we know we will have, given that there will be thousands of Tennesseans looking for work soon, as we already have many already. Next slide. And resources that we need currently in response to COVID-19 is, again, we realize that a rapid investment in technology is going to help us a lot. The volume that we're dealing with, it gives limits to in-person services. So we're trying to ponder and think about the right portfolio or ecology of technology that's going to allow us to scale and essentially run parallel services, in-person and virtual services, to deal with this increased magnitude of need out there across the state. Also, we know, and Ivan mentioned, that we have a decrease in federal resources for our work. We realize, too, we're bringing on new grants, which is a good thing, but we may have to enter into additional approaches to acquiring resources. And so a need there is also we need just grant management, grant writing resources to help us bring in the dollars necessary to get the programs we need to help Tennessee get back to our full capacity that we know we can have. And then last but not least, is just bringing in the state board voices. Your encouragements that you've sent through email has been great for the staff, but hearing your voices, I think, across the state is going to be a big deal. Understanding that the workforce services team, the entire workforce system of Tennessee, is ready to get individuals back to work. And for that, Chairman Berry, I think that's all I have in my presentation.
Thank you. Excellent, excellent work. I want to call out a question from Vonda McDaniel. She's just to make sure everybody who's by phone can see or hear her comment. She wants to know how workers access the fleet training and credentialing program. Can you answer that?
Yes, they can. We should have a communications plan ready by early next week. The system, I think there have been a few to sign up. We're trying to get it within Jobs for TN for a link, but if anything, they can actually email me directly now until we get that system up and running, and I can point them in the direction for signing up.
Very good. Very complimentary of the presentation. And Martha Axford, on behalf of the East Region, is really complimenting you and your team by just helping acquire the PPE and reopening AJC so that they could have the protection they needed to feel comfortable in doing that in person contact. So thank you for all your help and assistance. Any other questions for Kenyatta? Excellent. Really, really appreciate your team. I can't say enough about how pleased I've been with the innovation and creativity you guys have had to keep these services going. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Berry.
Yeah, let's hear from Mandy on Tennessee Department of Human Services.
Yes, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sounds good.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for the opportunity to share what we've been doing with the vocational rehabilitation program during COVID-19. And I just have a few slides prepared answering the same questions that Dr. Levitt explored with regard to workforce services. So we can go ahead and go to our next slide. So in particular, the vocational rehabilitation program has been working remotely. We very quickly were able to transition our staff from office-based and community work sites to be able to work from home, and nearly 100% of our VR staff are working remotely. The largest impact to our service delivery model and services was to our residential vocational rehabilitation training center at TRC Smyrna and our 17 community Tennessee rehabilitation centers across the state that provide large in-group training programs at the centers. And so following the governor's guidance that was issued on March 13th, we suspended those programs. And so students from TRC Smyrna were dismissed from the winter quarter and returned back home, and our large group classes that were occurring at the community TRCs were suspended at that time. However, we've also been able during this time to increase flexibilities regarding our service delivery, working with our staff and with our community rehabilitation providers to increase services that are delivered telephonically, online, doing some web-based service delivery, and also just really getting creative and finding alternative methods to connect with customers and meet them where they are and provide the services needed. We've also increased flexibilities regarding obtaining signatures. That was a big barrier for us. Even in this day and age, still have several things that are paper-based, but we're able to implement flexibilities regarding electronic signatures and verification of services. Next slide. So again, we are continuing to provide all of our VR services with the exception of those residential and large on-site training classes. We have continued to schedule services and appointments with VR customers as requested. And a lot of those services have explored innovative ways and creative approaches to connecting with customers, as I mentioned. One way that we've also been working is through video conferencing and FaceTime. VR counselors have been able to provide one-on-one counseling using that technology. And in particular with our Tennessee Rehabilitation Center at TRC Smyrna, we are in the process of implementing distance learning. And so all the students that were dismissed back in March will begin to participate in distance learning over a Google Classroom format that will allow them to participate from home online in that learning opportunity so that that is not lost. Next slide. Some of the challenges and the solutions that we are exploring for us in particular within the vocational rehabilitation program, we have been very sensitive to the fact that individuals with disabilities are one of the populations that are at increased risk for contracting COVID-19, and therefore we have been very sensitive to altering our services and meeting customers with where they are in terms of their comfort level in participating in services. And so we've seen quite a bit of a decline in requests for VR services, and have seen that individuals are electing to suspend their participation at this time. And so we are working with them through that decision and encouraging them to stay connected with us in a manner that they feel comfortable so that we can re-engage once they are comfortable with that decision. We also expect that, while our services have decreased, we do expect that many individuals who were previously successfully employed may have lost their employment during this time. And so we expect that we will be hearing from them in the future as the economy restarts and as jobs reopen. We expect that individuals will be seeking our support to regain their employment. And lastly, we've been sensitive and monitoring our community rehabilitation providers. These organizations are often small local businesses and nonprofit organizations, and they too have been impacted by COVID-19. So we have been monitoring their operations through an online survey, getting updates regularly from these organizations to make sure that they are still able to provide services to customers when needed. Next slide. So for us, again, we are using our current resources to continue providing services and doing that through alternative methods and serving customers remotely. One of the things that we are looking for with regard to relief, if you will, is increased flexibilities from the U.S. Department of Education. They have submitted waiver requests on behalf of the VR program to Congress that would allow for some additional flexibilities with the VR program. Those would include a waiver request that would allow us additional time to spend our FY19 funds. A second request is a waiver of the requirement that we set aside 15% of our funds for students with disabilities. As you can imagine, with schools closed and students returning home, it has been extremely difficult to continue providing services to students. And so we're working really hard to do that, but certainly reserving 15% of our funds when students may be choosing not to participate in services at this time makes it difficult. And then a third waiver request for us that has been submitted is in regard to our Tennessee Business Enterprise Program, which is the entrepreneurial program that supports individuals who are legally blind and allows them to operate vending and food preparation facilities in state and federal buildings. Currently, the support provided by the VR program is limited to an initial stock of supplies, but as you can imagine, as buildings closed and as individuals and workers, as they left these buildings, quite a bit of stock was lost and has sat in unoccupied buildings. And so in order to restock these facilities and think about as businesses begin opening up, that's going to be a huge expense for these managers, and we want to be able to assist them with our VR funds if possible. Next slide. I believe that's it. Any questions for VR?
Andy, thank you. Just a question, it makes perfect sense that, the participant number has decreased. And I know that you will anticipate a lot of those to come back, soon. Is there any opportunity to reach out to them and proactively say, hey, I know you've been working with us in the past, checking in on you. Is there anything we can do to, reestablish you into one of our programs? I don't know if that's, if you can have the manpower to do that, but it's a consideration or a question.
Absolutely. I think that is something that we certainly are interested in doing. And I think for us, that has actually been perhaps one of the silver linings, if you will, of the pandemic, is that it has allowed our VR counselors to actively engage and reconnect with our customers. And so I think, while we're seeing a decline in perhaps foot traffic in the office, it's allowed our staff the opportunity to reach out over the phone and through other methods to just check in on folks and see how they're doing. I know our staff that work regularly with students who are pursuing different educational paths, they immediately began reaching out to them as schools and universities were sending students home to participate in courses online. And so we wanted to make sure that the students had what they needed to be able to do that. So that has been one of the things that we have been working on with our team.
Thank you. What questions does the rest of the group have for? Marshall is saying we've had about 24,000 Tennesseans who have actually contracted COVID. Are there any VR services needed for those whose workers may have been infected and lost work?
I'm not sure I fully understand. I mean, so certainly anyone who has been impacted, and if that results in a disability, that certainly would make them eligible for VR services, and we will be working with those.
The COVID would have to impact them to the extent that it would then cause them to be on disability before that happens.
it would need, yes, to impact them such that they would have a disability, yes.
Understood. All right, what are the questions that the group has? Mandy, thank you very much. Excellent work by the team. I'm anxious to see the participation increase as we get folks back to work. All right, let's next hear from Jay Baker, Adult Education.
Thank you, Chairman Barry. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Wonderful. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon if you're in the East. My name is Jay Baker. I am the Interim Assistant Commissioner for the Adult Education Division, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you what we've got going on in the Adult Education Program and to discuss some of the opportunities for innovation and growth that we've already seen and that we anticipate will continue to see going forward in our local programs across the state. It's folks across the local areas with their agency administrators and local program directors have done a remarkable job navigating these challenges. And so definitely appreciate everyone's hard work in all those local areas. Next slide, please. Before I get into the specifics around the pandemic, I do want to update the board concerning our grant competition that we recently conducted and completed. And so I apologize if this is hard to read on your screen. I believe Eiler did send these slides as well as a table of the county breakdowns in your packet email for this meeting. If you want to reference that later. Essentially, we're looking at a very similar service delivery structure as we have had in the last year, with the one exception of adding Volunteer State Community College as an adult basic education grant holder there in Sumner County. But all the other agencies do remain the same, as you can see in that structure there. But we are excited to add Vol State to the adult education family. They had the grant many years in the past, up until about 5 years ago, and they were a strong performer, and we're excited to bring them back into the fold. Next slide, please. The other part of the competition was around integrated English literacy and civics education. It's basically our ESL program, also trying to fast track people into training and careers who are in the immigrant population. Similarly, this also looks very similar to what we've had this year. And with the exception of Workforce Essentials, we'll be taking IELCE grant for Rutherford County, and TCAT Knoxville will be taking the IELCE grant for Knox County, and we're excited about that. We haven't had robust services in those specific counties in the last couple of years. Those are limited funds, and so that's why we have limited our service delivery to those counties that have the largest population centers of the immigrant community. So again, we're excited about having that grant completed, and they will hit the ground running July 1 with this new service delivery model. And I'll be happy to take questions on that if you have any at the end of my presentation. So next slide, please, and I'll get into the specifics of the adult education response to the pandemic. So the name of the game for adult ed has been virtual instruction and distance education. And if you have ever experienced a distance education course yourself or taught one in any capacity, you are aware that it is not at all like a traditional learning environment, and it's a pretty steep learning curve for a lot of folks. And so that has been the biggest challenge for us, but the primary thing that we have focused on is enabling our service providers to ramp up their distance education offerings and trying to give them the resources and training that they need. So we've immediately issued guidance to help them transition to virtual instruction. We've updated our distance education policies and guidance for how to do that and how to track that in Jobs for TN accordingly. We've tried to procure additional distance education curriculum for our local programs. We did immediate assessments of what their needs were in terms of online curriculum and made sure that they were set up for success, at least in terms of the curriculum resources. We also tried to make our application as electronic and virtual as possible, whereas students previously had to fill out a paper application. We did create an electronic version of that to allow for students to do that completely virtually. We also provided guidance on purchasing local equipment for staff. This has been a common thread across the state that a lot of our local staff themselves are not set up to do virtual instruction. So we've made sure that we set them up with the resources and equipment that they need to be able to work from home and teach from home during the pandemic. Similarly, we've provided guidance for lending instructional materials and equipment to students. As you can imagine, the students for adult education the digital divide there is very real, and especially in rural Tennessee where there's lack of good internet connection. So we've really had to try to get creative on letting our local programs lend equipment for internet access and computer access to students, ensuring that they are accountable for tracking those things. And also just continuous technical assistance for distance education best practices. Again, a lot of our staff here at the state has been focused on providing as much technical assistance as we can, where these teachers, so many of them have never had to experience doing distance learning before and instructing in an online setting. And that's a very, very intimidating and difficult undertaking for a lot of our folks. And so we are helping them as much as we can in that aspect. Next slide, please. So again, primary service delivery right now is via distance education. We have 172 classes statewide that are set up in this distance education format, and that spans all of our service delivery from adult basic education to ESL classes to that integrated English literacy and civic classes. And so all students of adult ed do have the opportunity to participate in distance ed. And we have seen some very innovative work already among these classes with teachers and students really using all the advantages of the latest and greatest digital tools to communicate and to have these classes. So despite the learning curve, we are seeing some really neat and innovative practices happening. We do have some areas that are transitioning back to in-person instruction. They're being told to follow the local health and safety guidelines since every county is a little bit different. So we have seen some areas transition back. A big part of what we do is the assessments of students when they come into the program, as well as to get our measurable scale gains to see if they've actually learned what they need to learn with numeracy and literacy skills. And so only recently did these test manufacturers, TABE and CASAS, finally kind of give us some solutions for virtual assessment. And so we're finally ramping that back up. But we did have a bit of a hiatus there where we weren't able to do any of these tests for students. Similarly, the HiSET testing had quite a hiatus there. As you can imagine, trying to get people in the test centers was not a realistic thing, but they are starting to gradually reopen that as of the last few weeks across the state, and that includes in our TDOC facilities. And I know that they were very anxious to get HiSET testing going in our correction facilities as well. We have also received news that the virtual HiSET has become available, so students can actually take the HiSET from home under some pretty intense proctoring scrutiny to make sure that it's a valid assessment results for students and they can't cheat very easily. They've made sure that they've got all their security measures in place for that. That will be starting very soon, and we're excited about that. I think a lot of Tennesseans will take advantage of that opportunity to be able to take that HiSET, get their diploma without having to take the risk of going in person to a testing center. We are implementing Schoology, which is a learning management system. We're really excited about this prospect. It could really be a game changer for how we do adult education in Tennessee. Learning management systems being ways to track student progress for teachers, administrators, but most importantly for students to keep track of their own progress and to be able to access distance learning in that online tool. So we're still in the very early phases of implementation of Schoology, but it's looking very promising. We've had a lot of good feedback from teachers in our pilot group across the state. Finally, we are continuing to focus on career pathways and our integrated education and training programming. Now more than ever, we recognize how important it is for adult education to be a first step in the pipeline of career development and workforce development for these folks. And so we are really working with our local programs to help them ensure that they are infusing their classes with employability skills and contextualized curriculum to help these students fast track onto their careers. And so that's still very much a focus for us. Next slide, please. So some challenges, again, the digital divide for staff and students who either don't have access to the technological tools or just simply lack the digital literacy to use them effectively. We also, this paradigm shift towards distance education and blended learning as just a new instructional model is challenging for all of the aforementioned reasons. We continue to work with that and give guidance as necessary. The local jails are largely inaccessible. Our programs are the typically the sole providers in the county jails for education services. And since the jails have been a hotbed for the pandemic, they have probably rightfully so not let us in to teach those incarcerated individuals. And so we're hopeful that solutions will be found soon to access the jails. And enrollment and performance numbers, like the other partners, we have, you can see there in the tables below, taken a pretty big hit in our new enrollment numbers in this quarter, as well as our measurable skill gains have kind of leveled off there. And our diplomas, if you can see that bar chart, Q4 for this year, down to 19 diplomas. Again, we haven't been able to do any testing, so this is understandable. And we are hopeful now that we have these virtual options, and we're kind of finally getting some momentum behind distance learning, that we will see all of these numbers increase in the coming months. Next slide, please. Finally, our resource needs is primarily at the local level. Giving local technical assistance and professional development is our #1 priority, making sure that our local programs can procure their needed resources, that they get the training that they need on distance education, and that they connect with their workforce system partners. Again, we know that this is something that's been a point of conversation for many years under WIOA, and now more than ever, we really need to shore up the referral processes and make sure that our local folks are in direct contact with each other to make sure that adult education students get those wraparound services and those workforce development services. And then finally, that statewide learning management system, Schoology, that, again, we're really excited about what this could do for us in the future as we ramp it up and scale it across the state. It'll enable some more robust tracking of students and distance education opportunities, as well as really enable some instructor collaboration and resource sharing, which has been a long goal of ours at the division as well, to let teachers to be able to share their good ideas and best practices with each other. So that's it for me. I look forward to continuing to work with you and as the board and providing you the information that you need concerning the adult education program. We know how important adult education is for people's career opportunities. Again, it's that first step towards these folks improving their job prospects, as they got to improve their education first. So we truly do appreciate your advocacy for the adult ed program and for all of our students across the state of Tennessee. So my contact information is on the next slide, I think, Patrice, and then I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Excellent presentation, really well laid out. One of the questions we have from the group, I'll just read to everyone, is, if there's any, the question is if there's any opportunity to expand distance learning into rural Tennessee. Obviously, that goes hand in hand with broadband expansion, which is already a high priority. I'm just curious how that might impact adult education from a distance perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Chairman Berry. So this is absolutely a concern of ours. Even without the pandemic environment, getting the internet connection in rural Tennessee is a challenge. And so we are in communication with our local program leaders in those areas, encouraging them to be innovative and allowing them to check out hotspots to students, to do everything we can to give them the access that they need. It will be a continuing challenge. It's not just for adult education. I know it's much larger than that in terms of Tennessee's workforce and economic development, but we are certainly aware of that and looking for innovative solutions.
Thank you, Jay. And then just looks like a comment, not a question, from Marshall in regard to South Cumberland region, in regard to the RFPs that went out, that a lot of the places who were given the opportunity for RFP just don't have the capacity to respond in that regard. So just want to make you aware of that and keep that in mind. As you're trying to expand into those rural areas, be aware that a lot of the places we're trying to do that with don't have the capacity to help. So we may have to look for some alternative solutions. Marshall, I hope I represented that comment correctly, but it looks like you and Jay may want to have an offline conversation there. So looks like there's not.
Absolutely, be happy to do that, Mr. Gates. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? All right, let's hear from Steve, tell us about career and technical education.
All right, good morning, Chairman Berry. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of the Department of Education. Steve Plale, Senior Director of College and Career Experiences with the Tennessee Department of Education. And while Patrice is pulling up my slide deck, I just want to kind of echo the previous comments from Jay talking about adult education. I think education in general, we're having a lot of learning and growing this spring, as everyone is, and I appreciate what he mentioned about this being part of the larger scope and scale of the workforce and economic development community. So I cannot see my presentation. I don't know if you've that's pulling it up. So the department, as you and the board may be very well familiar with, the tornadoes and the COVID-19 pandemic have definitely disrupted instruction across the state of Tennessee this spring. And we at the department have worked pretty hard and fast to try and respond to that. I think it caught all of us off guard in the education world. So trying to respond to that, we immediately launched a needs assessment process. So you'll see that here in just a minute on the slide deck. Patrice, when you get that pulled up, if you could just go on to slide number 4. Trying to conduct a needs assessment across the state of Tennessee. We wanted to make sure that we had a coherent plan to support our school districts to address any sort of potential learning gaps or make up any missed instructional time that has occurred. Based on the governor's recommendation and the State Board of Education emergency rules, most school districts have concluded their school year kind of in mid-March. That is kind of when that effectively took place. And so working with school districts to ensure that we provide resources and support for our students in those to make up that missed instructional time and to address those learning gaps. We heard very loud and strong from our superintendents across the state of Tennessee. We needed some robust digital resources and a technology plan. I think that has been shared already previously, that there are a lot of concerns across the state of Tennessee regarding technology and access to reliable broadband and internet usage. Definitely a concern in the educational space as well. We also identified in the needs assessment that we need to address additional services for our students with disabilities, those students who are English language learners, or who may need additional mental health and counseling needs, and especially those students in our rural communities across the state of Tennessee. This has truly been transformational, I think is a good way to say that, across K-12 education and post-secondary education this pandemic. If you could go on to the next slide, please. What we have kind of outlined at the department, and again, this is not just related to workforce education or career and technical education. This is all of K-12 support and educational services. We laid out a plan at the department and have worked really closely with our superintendents and directors of schools to ensure that we can reopen school in the fall. And what that looks like will look very different from, I think, what we are all accustomed to, but definitely want to, and really it'll look different from district to district, school district to school district. But we want to make sure that whatever that looks like, whatever school looks like when it reopens in the fall, that we are prepared to meet the needs of our students, and we can adequately prepare them for their post-secondary aspirations. Next slide, please. specifically, some things that have happened or that we've been able to facilitate at the department regarding academics in general, and current technical education as a part of that. In responding to COVID-19, we have worked really hard and developed some really strong partnerships with some external stakeholders to develop some toolkits and resources for our school districts, ongoing guidance documents and FAQs. We provided a ton of resources and have had ongoing consistent communication with school districts. I believe that Commissioner Schwinn and the cabinet level leadership at the Department of Education are meeting with superintendents and directors of schools 3 times a week, trying to ensure that we are responsive to their needs and providing information for them. Part of that has been a very large partnership with the Public Broadcasting System, PBS of Tennessee. Some of you may be familiar with that, but the department worked really quickly to be able to provide instructional resources, lessons for students through the Public Broadcasting System to all 6 of those stations across Tennessee, so that students could still be receiving some educational instruction while they're at home or wherever they might be. Continue that online. There is hundreds of lessons that have now been posted online for parents to be able to use with their students or their children to ensure that the summer slide does not take even more of a toll on students as they progress. Other key partnerships that have been developed, it's not listed here, but one that really excited and proud of is the development of a post-secondary transition task force to ensure that those students who were at the secondary level in our high schools, as they're planning to transition on into post-secondary, whether that's at a community college, a TCAT, a university, or on into the workforce, are supported. And we're thinking about creative ways and innovative ways to be able to support those students. I know Dr. Lovett is a part of that task force, and appreciate his commitment and the commitment of all of those task force members to ensure that we're providing support for those students who are transitioning. Next slide. I want to just briefly talk about the CARES Act and what that looks like as far as one-time relief funds that will be distributed to LEAs, and what our plans are for that. As you're aware, Congress authorized the CARES Act that was signed into law by President Trump earlier this spring. And if you could go on to the next slide, you can see kind of a little bit of what that's going to look like for our schools here in Tennessee, as far as what the elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund will actually go towards. As a state, Tennessee will receive $259,891,154 that will go out to the majority of that. 90% of that will go out to school districts to be able to support and provide relief for future needs of our school districts. As you can kind of see there, the points, being able to provide and purchase technology. As we've already mentioned, technology and software connectivity issues are definitely prevalent across Tennessee. So this funding, this one-time relief fund, should be able to help districts and schools respond to that. Also can provide summer learning or supplemental programs, including those online programs for school districts and for students to be able to access. This funding will allow districts to plan for long-term closures if there's a resurgence of the COVID-19 pandemic, or if there are any other unforeseen issues in the future that we might be able to address. Can definitely focus this funding at the local level to focus on the needs of our special population students, help to improve those mental health services in a distance education framework, and any other activities that are necessary to maintain the operation of our schools as they move forward. Next slide. This kind of will wrap up, and you can actually go on to the next slide, Patrice. I apologize. The reopening of schools is definitely where we have shifted our focus at the department as of this time, and wanting to make sure that we provide as much guidance and as much technical assistance as we can provide to our school districts. The department is currently developing a lengthy and comprehensive local education agency, or LEA, guide that's for our school districts to be able to reopen in the fall, and what that could look like depending on schedules. But we are wanting to support our districts as much as possible there. We want to, or are developing as well, school reopening toolkits that would include a lot of different resources for distance education, if that is an option, or hybrid education, if that is a potential option for schools. Include samples, procedures, videos, lesson plans, instructional plans, all of those resources we are currently developing across all of the 3 priority areas of the Best for All strategic plan, and then also the key priorities of our strategic plan. So really excited about that, but it has definitely been a lot of work that has gone into trying to support our schools as they navigate this truly unprecedented time. So with that, I believe I am at my time. And if you go on to the next slide, Patrice, I think, is my contact information and can answer any questions.
Steve, thank you. I know that school districts are really being challenged to figure out how this is all going to work. So thank you for offering that support and being willing to be flexible in whatever needs they're going to have. Any questions for Steve? Not seeing any or hearing any, we'll move on. I know that we're a little over time. We're on the home stretch. I appreciate everybody who is hanging in there with us over time. So thank you for that. But let's hear from Lakeisha Peterson. Let's hear about TANF.
Thank you. And again, I'm Lakeisha Peterson with the Tennessee Department of Human Services, the TANF Program Director. And I will give you the TANF Program COVID-19 update. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So in response to the pandemic, currently we're streamlining our application process for families who's applying for the program. So these families do have the opportunity to go online and submit their application, as well as upload any needed verification that goes along with that application. And we're waiving the interview process. So our workers are processing these families' application based on the information provided. Of course, if additional information is needed, they're reaching out to them to contact them. For Families First, for those of you who know or don't know, there is a 30-hour requirement, meaning that families must participate in either being employed or doing some type of job search or education for 30 hours in order to receive the benefits. So currently during this pandemic, we are granting good cause to those families who have been affected by COVID-19, being that they may not have child care, or they were temporarily laid off, or that there's even health issues for not wanting to go in and work due to the COVID-19. So we're granting good cause to those families, meaning that they aren't losing any benefits because of the COVID-19. With our partners, we are encouraging our employment and case management service partners, as well as our Families Focused Solution partners. Now, these are partners who kind of monitor Families First TANF customers, and they enroll them in those job search activities. Our Families Focused Solution partners do short-term counseling to these families who may have some type of challenge in keeping or obtaining employment. So we have encouraged them to do online and phone engagements with these customers. And from feedback from them, that process has been going very well. The customers have been very receptive to discussing this over the phone or doing maybe WebEx or doing email, text, whichever virtual method that they find the best fits the customer's needs. The department as a whole for our family assistance program, we are located in all 95 counties. So we have closed the offices for person foot traffic. However, if customers are wanting to come in, they are able to make appointments by contacting their local office, and they're able to go in and speak with someone at that time. Besides that, we are ensuring that no customer is not receiving their case management services. They are still doing all of their services by phone or any other virtual tools that they're able to connect with the families with. You can go to the next slide. So some programs that we offered during this pandemic, on March 26th, we did implement an emergency cash assistance program. Now, this program is for families who became affected by losing their job, or they receive a reduction of income by at least 50% due to the COVID-19. These families will receive 2 months of allotment. The income threshold is higher for our emergency cash assistance program than it is for the regular TANF Families First program. And we do have a different allotment size, whereas household sizes 1 through 2 will receive $500, 3 through 4 receive $750, and household sizes 5 or more receive $1,000. This benefit is for 2 months, meaning they receive it the day that they are approved, they will receive it, and then 30 days after they receive that initial payment, they will receive the same amount without having to do any additional application for it. Today, this says that the department received over 68,000. Kind of update as of today is actually 76,000. So we have been receiving a lot of applications for this program. You could go to the next slide. For challenges, I kind of did challenges and solutions. So of course, with this being a new emergency cash assistance program, and there were a lot of families who were affected by this, we did receive an increase in call volume for our service centers or for any of our workers just to handle. So we have partnered with an outside contractor, and they've been assisting us with those incoming phone calls that's related to this emergency cash program and other benefits to kind of ease that from our regular family assistant workers so they can still continue on with the normal services. Also, at the beginning of this program, we were offering overtime to these to our workers to process our ECA applications. As you all may know, when we, I say on the first day, as soon as it became available, we probably received over 6,000 or 7,000 like within hours. So, we were at the beginning kind of on a processing time frame between 10 to 15 days from the application. But as of today, we're kind of processing them between some same day, but no longer than 3 days of receipt. So we have kind of moved out that application process and ensuring that these families are getting the assistance that they need in a timely manner. You can go to the next slide. As far as resources, we are currently using our assistant resources to provide these virtual services. Again, we're utilizing phone to have phone conversations with them, email, and whatever it is that fits the need of the family. For the emergency cash assistance program, we did create an online application using ServiceNow software. And what this does is making a seamless process for our customers as well as the staff. Our customers are able to go online, submit the application. They're uploading their application to, they're uploading their verification to the application. And as with our regular TANF Families First application, no interview is required for the emergency cash assistance program. So once they complete the application and upload the needed verification, we do have workers who are just going in and processing it and then sending approval or denial, as well as ensuring that they're receiving their EBT card, which is what the cash is being put on. You go to the next slide, and that is the end of my presentation. Have any questions?
Keisha, thank you. Just so important that we're able to keep these services going, especially if people are, what would normally cause them to fall out of qualification. I just appreciate you keeping that intact so that they're not losing that opportunity to get the services. So thank you for the report. Thank you for the details. Thank you for what your team was able to do to help those families. Here's a question from Kevin. Are we giving training to employees to prevent the spread of COVID as we open back the brick and mortar facilities?
So I won't be able to directly answer that, but yes, we have released guidance on the safety procedures for our workers as well as staff will follow as we're reopening our offices. So emails and training will be released to our staff. And media release is also going to be done, kind of explaining for the public to know how and, to provide them with the safety procedures as when we do open up our offices.
Lakeisha, this is Sherelle. How you doing?
Sherelle.
Great. This is Sherelle Campbell Street, and I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Tennessee Department of Human Services. And as Lakeisha said, we spent a lot of time at our department coming up with a reopening plan. And so to take it just a little bit deeper, staff were given guidance on how we are to reopen. All of our 95 offices are open, but they are by appointment only. Where we have seen a lot of people are just coming by to drop off things. And we are very fortunate in that a lot of the services that we provide, particularly in family assistance and as Lakeisha says, around Family First, people can do it totally online. You don't even have to come into the office. Where we're seeing people come to the office in those cases that they may be applying for the first time or they need additional assistance, but those are only by appointment only. And we do the COVID screening at the time that someone arrives, and you cannot come into our office without a face mask on. And but we have seen in the week that we have been open this week, we have had very few incidences of even having to turn away anyone. Most people do come to their appointment, but the majority of the people that are coming to DHS offices today is to drop off supplemental things that may be needed to either continue services or to start services. So we're very excited about being able to reopen in this new normal, if you will, and we're still continuing to work with the public as well as our staff to maintain the safest environment possible. So thank you, Lakeisha, and thanks for the question.
Yeah, good answer. Thank you for that clarification as well. Any other questions for Lakeisha? All right. So Rusty, just business as usual in the unemployment world, right? I think you're muted, Rusty. Take your microphone off mute for a second.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the segue with a little lightheartedness. I don't have much left in me after the last several weeks. I was asked to give a brief verbal overview of what we've gone through the last week so the board would understand that and kind of know what we've been dealing with. And you guys have been big supporters of me and my division, so I wanted to take a minute and do that. So here's where we are. As far as numbers, to put some perspective on this, since mid-March through the end of May, we have taken 581,405 initial unemployment claims. That's brand new unemployment claims only. That's not counting the additionals and reopens where somebody was already in a benefit year. So to put some context to that, in another 12-week period, when our unemployment rate was at 3.5% in the state of Tennessee, we would have been expected to take about 24 to 30,000 claims. And instead, we've taken between 600 and 700 when you count the additionals and reopens. So the last 6 weeks, every single week, we've had over 300,000 people certify for benefits and paid out in that time frame $2.175 billion plus in unemployment. Now, let me add something there for everyone to think about when they think those numbers are big. It gets a little more impossible to grasp when you think about in a 12-week span, if we would have normally taken 24 to 30,000 unemployment claims, that's regular claims. In that same time frame, we took 100,000 in this state that weren't even eligible for regular unemployment that we had to figure out how to process. So with those numbers, you can see some of the challenges we've faced. But in addition to the numbers, the sheer volume, we've had to, as some of the other assistant commissioners have mentioned, had to learn during this process to work from home and manage our staff from home. It's not just, in unemployment, it's not just throwing bodies at the problem. We need expertise, and that takes a while to get. You have to bring people into a classroom and actually teach them unemployment. Because if you don't administer the unemployment program correctly, there were millions of dollars written into the CARES Act itself to go back and audit states and make sure that in all of this pandemic and craziness and times that we've never experienced, that they were going to come back and still audit us and make sure that we administered the program right. To boot, we had a quarter change that happened right after the pandemic set in and everybody was ordered to stay at home and stop working. So that confused matters even more. Now, in addition to regular unemployment, regular state unemployment, which is called TUC, we had to, according to the CARES Act, implement the FPUC, which is the $600 that the federal government wanted added to unemployment checks each week. Then we had to implement the pandemic unemployment assistance for the self-employed. And then we had to implement and stand up in our system the pandemic extension unemployment compensation for those that had been on unemployment in the state of Tennessee but exhausted their benefits. So we've had some challenges during all this. I am proud to say that I think Tennessee has done an extremely good job at a nationwide level. We were the 10th state in the country to implement the PEUC and start paying that. So while we've had our challenges, we've done a pretty good job. I will give a shout out to Dr. Lovett and his AJC staff. As soon as this whole crisis happened, he turned what's the other biggest ship in this department besides mine, the whole workforce services side. He turned all that AJC staff around pretty quick, and we got them trained, and they started helping us because they have people come into those career centers, then they hear about unemployment, so they at least had a working knowledge of what we were trying to do. So to his credit, he turned that staff around and they helped us. We've also hired another company called Accenture that we are basically telling them what our needs are and how many staff that we might need going into any particular incident that we're going to face in the coming months. And they will train them, bring them here, train them accordingly, and then we can get them on our team as we're having to try to redirect. And when all this happened, when the unemployment rate was 3.5%, that's the way we were staffed in Tennessee for 3.5%. And now I think the unemployment rate is 14.5%. So you can see the dilemma that we had. Also, every division within our department sent in troops to reinforce us, and we did some real quick trainings of anybody and everybody that they could donate to us, and they were instrumental in helping us with some of the initial influx of things like password resets and issues that people were running into in the system. So I guess to close, I'm glad to say that while I never thought a week where 20,000 plus unemployment claims would be a break, I am glad to say that the claims are dropping. We had just over 20,000 filed last week, so that's a positive. We have set up a job refusal hotline in this state. We've had it up and going for weeks, and we've already worked over 2,000 job refusal tickets where employers are contacting us and letting us know that maybe their workforce is not willing to come back, and so we have to investigate those. We will see a big increase in our appeals and our cross matches of wages. All that will increase, but we're going to try to redirect some departmental staff that already have some knowledge of the program to help with those backlogs who are just trying to get them accomplished a lot, but we've got a lot to do. This is going to last for a while longer, and just getting out of the backlog and all the second level stuff with unemployment will be a challenge. But I appreciate everybody's support and belief in us, and thank you all very much.
It's certainly been a team effort, and just couldn't have done it, without everybody's support and contribution, flexibility, and just really commend your team again to not only take care of our Tennesseans, but be a leader in the country compared to some of the other states who were just riddled with issues. So thank you for being proactive and staying ahead of those problems.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to my team.
Questions for Rusty, comments? Okay, hearing and seeing none, I think we are at the end of our meeting. Any other comments, Commissioner or Deputy Commissioner Thomas? Would you like to say anything in closing or help us wrap up?
Chairman Jeff McCord, just thank you for this meeting, and thank you for all the people who are responsible for putting this meeting on in an environment that we are in. And thank you for leading, and thank the board for leading and staying with us during this difficult time.
Excellent. Well, I know we went a little long, but we still did it in less time than it takes to watch an Avengers movie, and we were much more productive and with this important work. So thank you for everyone who contributed today. Certainly the engagement by everyone, not only at this meeting, but in the meetings ahead through the committees and so on. So thank you for getting important policies changed. If anybody's curious, I was able to enjoy Mount Wernitai, and I got over 7 miles walking during this meeting. So it's been really good. This isn't my ideal favorite setting, but hopefully, soon we've made it work. Again, thanks to all the people who organized this, the technology, Patrice, Eiler, Justin, thanks for all your help you did in coordinating, making this possible so that we could advance the work of the board and keep that going. So all very good, and we'll look toward the next meeting in August. Still waiting to see what the format of that meeting will be, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And I hope everybody has a great summer. Thanks again for all of your contributions. We'll say the meeting is adjourned.